They told you Indiana was exploring trades by tonight's deadline. They told you the Fever were quietly working the phones as the season tilted into the home stretch. But here's the snapback you can fact-check in seconds. The WNBA trade deadline already closed on August 7th. The only clock that's ticking this week is the playoff eligibility from waivers cutoff on August 29th, and that changes the entire story you've been fed. Start with the biggest receipt because we don't bury the lead. On Tuesday night, August 26th, Indiana beat Seattle 95-75 without Caitlin Clark, as Aaliyah Boston went for 27 and 9, and Odyssey Sims added 22. That matters because Sims signed a 7-day contract on August 24th, which shows how Indiana's front office is managing risk while the Clark timeline stays murky. It's a roster patch that also works as a message. We will buy time and keep leverage. So what's really going on in Indianapolis? Clark's right groin strain has kept her out since July 15th, and while she participated in non-contact work and shoot-around on August 24th, the staff hasn't cleared her for full practice. That doesn't read like a conspiracy. It reads like a franchise protecting a core asset in the final sprint toward the playoffs. And yet the chatter insists on trade talks like it's still early August. Let's pull the calendar on screen. Trade window closed August 7th. Playoff eligibility from waivers, August 29th at 5 p.m. Eastern. Those dates aren't opinions. They're the rulebook scaffolding that defines every front office move this week. So when someone tells you trade buzz by tonight, ask them one question. Trades with who? What the Fever actually did was use the tools they still have. 7-day deals, hardship flexibility, rotation tweaks, and minute ladders to keep the floor spaced, and Boston in her sweet spots. Sims stepping in on a short-term pact and then punching in 22 points 2 days later is not a stealth blockbuster. It's a timely bandage that buys real wins while Clark ramps up safely. Now, zoom in on the stakes because they're not small. Indiana entered this week clinging to a playoff slot in a tight middle, where one bad night can flip a tiebreaker and 2 bad nights can drop you into the 9 seed. With Clark out, the Fever need familiar things done perfectly. Clean glasswork from Boston, early paint touches to collapse the shell, Mitchell's quick decisions off pin downs, and enough second side pace so defenses can't load to 1 star. They got that formula against Seattle. They'll need it again and again. Here's the pressure people miss. The injury timeline isn't just about when Clark suits up, it's about how much practice she stacks with contact before the team trusts her to absorb playoff intensity. Indiana's staff has been consistent about that language. Multiple practices, full-speed reads, clear strength markers. That's not smoke, it's a checklist. And it explains why the front office is patching the guard room instead of detonating the core. But let's Steelman the counter case. Maybe you say the Fever benefited from the rumor cycle. Maybe the trade talk, even if impossible after August 7th, kept other teams guessing and cooled any last-minute poaching attempts around waiver timing. Maybe a little fog helps when you're protecting margins in a parity-heavy league. If that's your argument, then the calendar still rules. After August 7th, leverage doesn't come from mystery trades. It comes from who clears waivers, who can be playoff eligible by the 29th, and whether your cap table can flex for a late ad. That's why the Sims move is a tell. On paper, it's a straightforward 7-day. In practice, it's proof that Indiana values live dribble creation right now, even from a newcomer, because it keeps Boston from wearing double teams as early, and it keeps Mitchell from shouldering every late clock rescue. When those two look fresher in the 4th, the downstream effect is roster-wide. Short-term ink, long-term oxygen. Let's talk about Clark, the player, not just the headline. Her value isn't only the logo threes or the skip passes that shift 2 weak side defenders at once. It's the gravity that flattens the opposing scouting report. With her out, every Fever possession starts against a more honest shell. That's punishing for role players who depend on the early advantage she usually creates. Indiana's answer has been to fake that gravity with early paint touches and quick exit passes, then punch with Boston on the second action. It's working well enough to buy them time. Now, the mid-video reveal, because this is the pivot point that reframes the discourse. The deadline that matters this week isn't about trades at all. It's the waiver playoff eligibility on August 29th. If your front office is combing the market today, it's not to trade a core piece. It's to identify anyone who might shake loose and be eligible for the postseason. That's what the receipts actually point to. And that's why the rumor about trade exploration on August 26th feels like a mismatch. Look again at Tuesday night's scoreboard, 95-75. Boston dominated early pockets, Sims punished soft coverage, and the Fever reinforced a message. We can hold serve without Clark, and we can do it by playing to identity, not panic. That's the kind of win that changes the tone in the locker room. It doesn't rush the timeline, it calms it. What about seeding? This stretch is a razor. Indiana's goal is obvious. Avoid the 8 seed, dodge a monster first-round draw, and keep any tiebreakers in reach. That means stacking clean wins, managing travel and rest, and squeezing efficiency from short rotations. It also means the front office won't be bullied into a move that mortgages cost-controlled talent for a marginal short-term bump. The CBA doesn't reward that kind of panic. Now consider Coach Stephanie White's posture. She has been careful, sometimes to the frustration of a fan base that wants return dates. But she's laid out the same path every time. Practice markers, confidence in contact, and no shortcuts for a star who's part of the franchise's multi-year crest. That isn't hedging. That's adult supervision in a season that's thrown real injuries at a young roster. Let's address the word hid, because it's doing heavy lifting in the discourse. Did the Fever hide Clark's injury, or did they protect detail, offer incremental updates, and leave room for a non-linear rehab? There's a difference between deception and discipline. When a player moves from non-contact to controlled contact, that might be one social clip, one quote, and hours of work you never see. The receipts this week tracked that exact pattern. There's also the media economy to consider. Trade talks is a phrase that prints clicks. 7-day plug while we wait for waiver eligibility feels boring, until a veteran guard drops 22 2 nights later. That's the clip, that's the heat, and it's why teams tolerate the rumor mill. Because every now and then, the noise obscures the signal long enough to keep the plan on schedule. If you're an opposing scout, you don't care about the headline. You're charting possessions. You're seeing Indiana lean into early slot cuts, clear out post seals for Boston, and quick empty corner drives that collapse help without Clark's perimeter gravity. You're also seeing a defense that lives and dies on communication with new guards in the mix. That's where 7-day additions can wobble. Indiana's job is to cover those seams with simple rules and short leashes. There's a bigger salary cap point hidden here. In the WNBA, you don't have NBA-style cash in trades, and you can't magic away dead money. Every decision is tighter, every late season add more surgical. That's why teams use the smallest tools, hardship, 7-day, minimum slotting, to buy time and keep the core insulated. When those tools line up with the schedule, you don't need a blockbuster. You need a clean week. Now the counter-argument from fans, transparency is respect, and the Fever should have said more, earlier. Fair. But transparency and specificity aren't the same. If Indiana had put a hard date on Clark and had to pull it back, the same voices would cry misdirection. Injury timelines don't care about narrative beats. They care about tissue, strength, and confidence. The basketball has to make sense on the floor before the press release makes sense online. What happens next, and what should you watch for? First, the practice reports. If Clark stacks full-speed reps and back-to-back days without a setback, you'll see that reflected before any official status flip. Second, the minute ladder. If Sims or any short-term guard holds up defensively while giving Indiana live dribble juice, you can keep rotation stable and limit stress on Boston into the fourth. Third, the waiver wire. If a veteran gets cut loose before August 29th and fits the Fever's needs, the front office will move quickly. Here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. If Clark returns for even a small ramp at the end of the regular season, Indiana's ceiling changes overnight. Not because she erases every problem, but because her passing reorders the defense on the catch. Mitchell looks a step faster. Boston gets cleaner entries. Role players live in daylight again. That's how one player makes 3 teammates better without taking a shot. If she doesn't return before the playoffs, the blueprint doesn't vanish. It just gets narrower. Indiana can still win a series by controlling pace, protecting the defensive glass, and stealing clutch minutes with hot shooting from the short-term guard spot. It's a thinner path, but it exists. The margin for error is small, and every foul trouble night becomes a weather event. That's why the front office chose insulation over noise. So, was this a cover-up or smart management? Look at the receipts, not the headlines. The league closed trades on August 7th. The Fever added a 7-day guard on August 24th and one on August 26th. Clark ramped up non-contact work on August 24th and remained out against Seattle. As the staff has consistently said, she needs full practices first. The dots connect without any conspiracy ink. Let's land this with a forecast. Scenario A. Clark clears contact and gets 1 or 2 regular season games before the bracket locks. Indiana avoids the 8 seed, leans on Boston's interior dominance, and sees a version of their spring spacing again. In that path, the Fever punch above their seed and become the team no one wants in round 1. Scenario B. Clark sits until next year. The Fever still fight to hold the line with defense, boards, and enough guard scoring to keep late-game math friendly. It's grittier, but not hopeless. Either way, the front office played the board in front of them, not the timeline in your feed. They didn't need trades they couldn't make. They needed to keep the room steady, protect a star, and bank wins. On Tuesday night, they got one that mattered. The rest of the week will tell you if the plan was discipline or denial. The receipts already lean one way. By the time we hit the real deadline on August 29th, remember what the calendar says and what the court says. The calendar says waivers. The court, at least for a night, said Indiana can hold without Clark, and it said it loudly. That's not a rumor. That's the scoreboard. So if you hear trade talks by tonight, ask for a date, a rule, and a box score. And then ask the only question that matters in late August basketball: did the Fever buy enough time for their best player to be their best player again? We're about to find out.